So here is my Highball to Thurmond 50 miler race report. I just wanted to start by talking a little bit about what I was thinking about before the race, and not a lot really because it was 4 a.m. in the morning. But while driving from my hotel in Charleston to Montgomery, West Virginia, where the start line is along the Kanawha River, I drove through Cabin Creek. Cabin Creek is where the NBA legend Jerry West, guard and then later general manager for the Los Angeles Lakers, that's where I don't know if he's born there or not, but it's certainly where he grew up. They always, one of his nicknames as a player was the Hick from Cabin Creek. One of the great, great NBA basketball players ever. And so good, in fact, that the NBA logo is based on Jerry West. So I just thought just a fun kind of piece of trivia to start this report with, because I was thinking about that race morning, sitting in my car waiting for the race to start, because I got there about a half hour or so before the race and it was a little chilly, so I just sat in the car for a little bit. So that said, we'll take Mr. West off the screen here and go ahead and talk a little bit about the race itself. It has 50 mile, 55K, 55K ruck, and a 50-mile relay option. I was doing the 50 miler. If you're doing the 50 miler, you're doing a point-to-point race from Montgomery, West Virginia, the previously mentioned start line, to Thurmond, West Virginia, where the race ends. If you're doing the 55K option, either of them, you're going to do a point, or you're going to do an out and back from Thurmond, West Virginia, where the finish line is. You're going to go out, that's where it starts, and then you go back. The 50 milers are racing the train, so there are some tight cutoffs involved. And by racing the train, you don't have to run as fast as a train goes, but the train leaves the station in Thurmond at 6:45, so you have got to be done and waiting on the train by, I aimed for 6 with my pacing plan, and I think that was probably about right. I don't think that anybody going later than that is going to have a lot of luck. So, but even so, definitely you're going to have to be done, I would think, by 6:30, so you've got time to get back across the river there to the train station. So there's some tight cutoffs. This race for me was a bit of a stretch because the average pace that I needed to be able to run was maybe 16-minute miles, which sounds slow, but over that distance, you're moving fairly steadily. Even though it's a combination of road, gravel, and trail, I still felt like it's a push to get there, even with the first 20 miles were road and gravel, basically. And it had some really significant climbs, particularly one early in the race up Cotton Hill. The course itself is beautiful. This race was worth running just to see the course. Even though I ended up with a DNF, I was still really happy I ran the race. So I would definitely encourage anybody that's thinking about this race. If you're a slower runner like me, it's hard. You do get an early start option, which I took. So that gave me an extra hour and 15 minutes. So instead of 12 hours and 45 minutes, I had 14 hours, although again, realistically, I felt like I had 13, maybe 13 and a half. Because again, you don't want to come into the finish line right when the train's supposed to leave the station. So that's the race. As far as how the race went. I'll talk about my race in a bit, but first I would just want to give some shout outs to some people. First of all, the race volunteers were phenomenal. The race director had sent out a call for volunteers right before the race, maybe a week before, so it was pretty clear that they were having trouble getting enough volunteers. And in fact, often the aid stations just had one person at them, but they all knew what they were doing. They were all fantastic. I cannot commend the volunteers enough. For those volunteers that I forgot to say thank you while I was at the aid station, I apologize. I tried to make sure and thank everyone, but sometimes you're in the business of getting your stuff together and getting in and getting out, and you forget. So the race director, Rich, was just on top of everything. When you do an event this long, it is guaranteed that you will run into issues. Things will go wrong. Whether that was the course was really muddy in some sections and he allowed the 55K people to start early if they wanted to, or it was the last drop bags weren't back in time for us to take them with us on the train. He arranged to get those drop bags to the train station in Montgomery so that we would have them when we got off the train. Little things like that. He was on top of everything. I saw him interact with the runners, and he was really good with his interactions with the runners. Sometimes he had to give people tough news. Hey, I'm sorry, this is the cutoff. You can't go on. Kudos to him because he did it really well. I ran the race with two friends, Don White and Mike Lynch. Both finished and did phenomenal. They both set PRs. Mike had an incredible time. He did it in like 10 and a half hours. Don was under 12 hours. So they both did fantastic. The after party for the race was really good. It was really fun. You could take a quick dip in the river if you wanted to, and you had a place to get cleaned up. They let you have a bag at the finish line so you could change into some clean clothes, because everybody knows how nasty you are as an ultra runner after 50 miles or 55K, whatever you do. There was champagne for the train ride back, and honestly the course itself was just really beautiful and in really good shape. I did not run the section that was supposed to be really bad and really muddy. The sections I ran that people were kind of saying, it's muddy, and people were kind of walking like trying to avoid the mud and stuff, but the sections I was on were not bad. There was some single track between Hawks Nest State Park and the next aid station right after we crossed back over into crossed back over the new river into the other side to climb up the other side of the gorge. And there were some sections on the way to the last aid station I got to that had some mud, but honestly it was not bad. Those of you who ran like Land Between the Lakes some of the years where the lake's been up and then receded and it's just a mud hole, or Vernal Equinox the last couple years was really muddy. This was not in any of the sections that I was doing. It was not this crazy deep, suck your shoe off, ankle deep mud. Although I did have one of the runners tell me that they nearly lost a shoe in the section that was supposedly pretty muddy. So I do know that there was some muddier sections than what I did. But all things considered, it wasn't bad. So, and it was a beautiful course. We'll talk a little bit. I've got a couple pictures that I took of the course. Of course, you've got the kind of iconic picture is of the New River Gorge Bridge here. That's famous. I swear, I think this is on the back of the West Virginia State Quarter. But I'll let somebody else dig out a quarter to see if that's true. This is, and I think the water was a little high here, so you really can't see the rapids, but you can a little bit, like down right under the bridge. But this is sort of an iconic place for whitewater rafters. And there was a lot of running water. Pretty much all day I was able to hear water running, which I guess there are pros and cons to, right? This is right after going down. I'd say this is about the 18-mile mark or so. This is before I went into Hawks Nest State Park. We had this really nice run along a road that had a creek running beside us that was just beautiful. Had lots and lots of boulders and rushing waterfalls and stuff. And I really enjoyed this part of the run, which is unusual for me. I rarely enjoy running on pavement, but this was pretty. So there's that. Probably the only downside was I had to pee. And when you've got to pee, running for several miles next to rushing water, it's a bit of a drag. So this is actually in Hawks Nest State Park, I believe. Definitely before the 20-mile aid station, but not long. And this was just one of the many little waterfalls that were visible along the single track sections. I would, just for this stuff alone, the course was beautiful and fun to be on. And I made sure and stopped and took some pictures. This is me. Mainly I shared this picture, put this picture in the presentation because I want people to see, I'm not lying when I tell you that ultra running is fast hiking with snacks. This is me walking out of the mile, 15 or so aid station with a handful of bacon. And the race photographer was on top of it. He understands the assignment. He took like 4 pictures of me walking out of eating bacon. So that's it. That's ultra running. And this is us at the finish, Dawn and myself and Mike. And again, kudos to those two for fantastic races. My goals for the race. My big goal was to finish the race before the train left. But the big things I wanted to do with this race, test hydration and nutrition definitely. As it's getting warmer and more humid, it's getting harder for me to stay on top of my nutrition and to find sports drink that works for me. So wanted to do that. Have a new heart rate monitor, the Chorus armband heart rate monitor, and also last minute I had to pick up a new watch. So I had to get in here, and it had a couple different features. It's still a Pace 2. It's the same Chorus I had before, but now the new Pace 2, you can actually upload a GPX file of the course, and you set the navigation mode at the beginning. It doesn't give you turn-by-turn directions, at least as far as I can tell, but you can theoretically check and make sure that you're on course. So I wanted to test that feature. And also, since I had a new watch, I went ahead and set up the screens a little differently. I've been trying to make my watch and my planning for the race mirror the way I try to think about a race. And in this case, one of the things I wanted to do was to set the primary screen of my watch to show me to remind me of what my current heart rate is, because current heart rate, I try to keep it in zone 1 or zone 2, because keep that kind of continuous low burn. And I also wanted to keep an eye on my overall pace. So overall pace was one of the things I had on the screen, because, as mentioned earlier, to make the cutoff, I have to average 16-minute miles. And finally, the other piece that I wanted to watch, keep a good eye on, is how far it is to the next aid station. So usually when I'm doing an ultra, I push the lap button when I come into the aid station. And then going out of the aid station, I can kind of watch that counter and see, okay, I've gone 4.5 miles. It was 5 miles to the next aid station, so I'm almost there. It's a really good tool to have in conjunction with a pacing card for your goal races, is to know, okay, I'm almost to the next aid station. And that takes some of the thinking out of it, which is also good, especially later in a race as you get tired. And kind of tying into that, okay, let's work from aid station to aid station during the race, is just one of the things I've really been trying to do from a running standpoint with ultras, is just stay in the moment and enjoy where I am right now. And so that's what I wanted to do. And in fact, I had my headphones with me, but I didn't listen to headphones all day, partly because I just wanted to be in the moment with the race and be aware of surroundings and listen to the birds and listen to the running water and things like that. So staying in the moment has been something I've been really working on. My race went really well, honestly. I DNF'd, but that was always a possibility with a tight cutoff. When you've got a tight cutoff, if something goes wrong, then it can be hard to fix the problem and keep going. And that's kind of what happened to me. So, first 10 miles was all paved. Normally hate running on pavement. Just kind of really focused on enjoying it, keeping my heart rate down. We had 2 or 3 decent-sized uphill climbs that I just briskly walked. I think I did those first 10 miles at about 13 minute a mile pace, maybe 12.5 minute a mile pace. Don't know the exact number. But it was, plenty fast enough, staying well ahead of the cutoff, and felt really good. It was starting at 4:45. It was nice and cool in the morning, stayed cool the whole time I was on the road, really stayed cool the whole time I was going up Cotton Hill, which is a huge, I feel like maybe about 1,000 feet of the gain in the race were right there. And over the course of about 4 miles. So I was really worried about losing a lot of time there. My goal was to do that one at under 16 minute a mile pace, knowing that I was going to be mostly walking. So that required that I really focus on, okay, you got to keep the feet moving briskly. And in fact, I did those 4 miles at 15 minutes a mile, walking up a pretty steep uphill. So that was fantastic. After that, I wanted to use the time on the way into Hawks Nest State Park, which was 3 or 4 miles, pretty much downhill. And those were, in fact, the fastest miles I had in the whole race, because it was all downhill. And I want to say my fastest mile was about 11 minutes or 11 and a half minutes or something. So that was good. And once we got into Hawks Nest State Park, I think some people did a shoe change there, but that's really where the single track started. So I did get out the poles and work on the next section, which of the the 2 trail sections I did, the next section was the most technical. It had a fair amount of little rocks and small, I don't know that I'd call them stream crossings. They were more just spots where there was a little runoff coming down the hill. But, I mean, they were little rivulets, I guess, but it wasn't like you're crossing a creek or anything. It really didn't get my feet wet at all in that section, even though there was some running water. And in fact, I don't think I got my feet wet in the entire course. So I know a lot of people were worried about potentially blisters and stuff like that. Might have been a little bit nasty again in that muddy section that I didn't do. But I would do, and for what it's worth, I generally don't have problems with blisters anyway. I slather if I think my feet are going to get wet, which is just about every trail run. You figure they probably will. If I even think my feet are going to get wet, I slather them with trail toes and put on. And I always wear Injinji medium weight toe socks. So doing that, I just don't have trouble with blisters. So, and I didn't. No problems with blisters in this case. I was on time, right on time, leaving the Hawk's Nest, the 20-mile aid station. My goal was to be in and out. My ETA was 9:30, and I was out of there at 9:30. I was right on pace at the next aid station. I might have been... No, I thought I was running behind, because I remember being a little frustrated and concerned, thinking I was losing time. But then you had a long downhill, and I actually checked right about the time I went into the aid station, and I think I was right on time, because I was supposed to be there at 10:55, and it was right about there that I was in and out. I did, at that 25-mile aid station, make one really big mistake. It was starting to get hot, and I had meant to switch because the tailwind just wasn't working. It didn't taste good, and it starts to get kind of funky tasting. And I thought, okay, I need to dump this and just put water and just go with water and start taking twice as many salt tablets. And I didn't do that. I got to the aid station, got to think, okay, what food is there? Well, they didn't have any food. They had some jelly beans and some hummus wraps. Oh, and some boiled potatoes. And none of that. Normally, I would think boiled potatoes might be pretty good, but I had one time that was just so nasty it just turned my stomach. So I'm always a little leery of getting boiled potatoes with salt now, even though it sounds great. But I ended up thinking, okay, I'm just going to get some pretzels. But I didn't refill my water because it was pretty full, and I didn't empty the tailwind and fill it. And so what I ran into in the next section, and that probably wouldn't have been a big deal because one bottle of water probably would have been sufficient, or close to one bottle of water, if I was moving normal pace. But my back started to stiffen up coming up that next section of trail, and I was moving slower. I was probably doing not super slow, but probably like 17 to 19 minute miles. I wasn't running a lot because it was a lot of uphill, and if it wasn't uphill, it was some technical or it was just kind of like hurting my back to run, and not sure why that is. I'll talk about that here in a little bit, but basically because my back was sore and I was moving slower, I didn't have enough fluids. And I didn't have enough fluids, and it kind of got progressively worse. I think my last mile or so before I got into the aid station was like 21 minutes. So I got in the aid station, pretty knackered, pretty low on fluids, need some calories because I hadn't been drinking the tailwind because it was nasty. So I drank some Coca-Cola and ate some orange slices, and I think I had a quarter peanut butter and jelly sandwich, just trying to get myself back in a better physical frame of mind. And about that time, Dawn came through the aid station. Mike had caught me well before this. Mike caught me right before the last aid station. But this was about when Dawn caught me. And she got her aid and went on. But she told me, she said, "Hey, I'm walking if you want to catch up." And I thought, hey, that's a good idea. I thought, I catch up to her, I can kind of let her set the pace, and I can just keep up, and that'll keep me ahead of the cutoff. So I tried that, but I couldn't catch her. It's coming out of that aid station, you do like a 1.7 mile loop and come back and hit the same aid station. I thought if I can catch her before she goes out of this next aid station, I might be able to finish still. But I couldn't catch her, and it took me probably to do those 1.7 miles, probably took me about 40 minutes. So I was under 20-minute mile, but, or 35 minutes maybe. So I was under a 20-minute mile, but not by a lot. I think I did like a 18 and a half and 19-minute pace. And got back to the aid station with about 10 minutes before the cutoff. I had a 2:05 p.m. cutoff at that aid station, and a roughly an hour and 45 minutes to get to the next aid station. The next aid station was 7 miles away. So an hour and 45 minutes, 7 miles away, that's a 15-minute mile. And I had not done a 15-minute mile since the downhill mile going into the aid station at mile 25. And that one was much faster than 15. That was probably about a 13-minute mile, actually. But the fact remained that I felt realistically there's no way I'm going to make this cutoff. Which is why I was trying to latch on with Dawn, because I thought, okay, if I can latch on with Dawn, I can maybe work through this. So I went ahead and dropped at that aid station. And I think in this case, I definitely made the right decision. That's probably one of the toughest things we face as ultra runners. Okay, when we decide to drop, are we making sure that there's no chance that we can keep going? And in this case, physically I could have kept going, but it was not physically possible for me to make the next cutoff. So I think from that standpoint, that's the right decision. I would say that what I feel like I'm doing a lot better at now, even when I do DNF, is even if I'm kind of on the struggle bus and don't feel like going on, I will still get out there and do another section or another couple miles just to kind of see, okay, can I bounce back from this low spot? Because, the thing you got to remember about ultras is we tend to think, oh God, it's never going to get any better, but it always does. It can get better. It doesn't have to just keep getting worse. So in this case, it did not get better. And because it didn't get better, I stopped. There was another runner that came into the aid station after I had decided to drop. I feel like she came into the aid station with about 10 minutes left before the cutoff and still hadn't done that 1.7 mile loop. And the race director was actually there at that point helping the aid station volunteer close up the aid station and making sure that everybody was accounted for before the cutoff because of the train thing, right? You got to make sure you get the people back to Thurmond. So he actually told her, "I'm so sorry, you cannot continue." And again, really gracious about it. As a runner, she was very adamant that she felt she could finish. And I felt for her because it's, I thought the confidence she had, and I told her, I said, look, I get it. This is hard, and I am so sorry, but in this case, that next cutoff is really tough because, I already knew I wasn't going to make it, and I don't think she would have either. But I was able to talk to her. I hope helped her. Normally I'm a little reluctant to talk to somebody like that, but she was so upset, and I felt so bad for her. I asked her, I said, hey, I think you've done a great job today. Can I give you a hug? And she said, yeah. And so I gave her a hug, and I said, look, I am so impressed with how much you believe that you can do this distance, and I think you're right. I think you can. It's probably not today, but there's going to be other races, and I think that you're going to finish this distance at some point. So, I don't know. Hopefully that helped her. I think it did, but I think maybe it was her first attempt at this distance or something. It's a very important goal to her. So, and I get that. I've felt that way before. So, in this case, I made the right decision to drop. I just wasn't going to make the next cutoff. So, that's how my race went, swimmingly until mile 25. After mile 25, because of the back and then getting behind in fluids and stuff, just the wheels came off. One thing goes wrong, and then something else goes wrong, and something else goes wrong. If you get a cascade of things like that, it can be very difficult to get back to where you need to be to make cutoffs, and that's really what happened to me. So, going forward, first of all, some takeaways. The navigation thing on the watch, freaking awesome. Several times I thought, ooh, am I still on the course? Have I missed a turn? Especially going to that last aid station, right? You're starting to get really tired, and you're thinking, surely I've missed the aid station by now. But then I would check the watch, and it'd be like, nope, still on course. The screen setup, something dumb I did. The idea of having each lap be the miles to the next aid station, brilliant. Forgetting to turn off auto lap, not so brilliant. Every time I went a mile, the watch would reset the current lap instead of me manually resetting. So I needed to turn off the auto lap, and in fact I've already gone in there and done that now, so it doesn't auto lap on a trail run. The external heart rate monitor is fantastic. If you run by heart rate, I strongly recommend getting a heart rate monitor that they just update more quickly. I'd already noticed this with training, but also we've got some dogs barking in the background. So that's going to happen. You're going to get dogs barking in my videos. So the external heart rate monitor, I'd already noticed that, oh wow, this really it really measures heart rate much more accurately than the wrist-based heart rate monitor on my watch when I'm doing speed work and stuff. It's great for monitoring your heart rate during the course of a trail run too. So I was really happy with that. One of the things I kind of messed up, I was in a hurry the other day when I did my race card, my aid station checklist that's got like the distance to the next aid station and stuff like that. in this case, what I forgot to put, I did the miles between each aid station, which is fine. I should have also put the total mileage because that's a nice backup just in case you forget or you hit auto lap by accident or something in the middle of a lap. So the auto lap going through wouldn't have been a big deal if I'd have known how far it was for total distance to each aid station, because I could just check the total distance I'd run so far to know how close I was to the next aid station. So I got to fix that when I do the card for my next race. On the back of my card, I need to start putting an aid station checklist. It just needs to be a generic checklist to remind me to go through it as I come into the aid station to make sure fluids, switch over to water, would be a good thing to put on that. To think about that as calories, eat, just little check drop bags if I've got a drop bag there. Just a little sunscreen, put on sunscreen if it's sunny, right? So I need to have just a few little quick items to remind myself to do them, because I feel like most races I'll forget to do something at an aid station that I meant to do, and a lot of times it's not a big deal. I just deal with it at the next aid station. But sometimes it's something like, oh crap, it's really hot and now I don't have enough water because I've still got one flask full of tailwind. So that's something that is definitely in the cards. I need to be more intentional about my race cheat sheet. And honestly, at this race, I feel like the poles, I usually use hiking poles. I feel like at this race I didn't need them, honestly. With a lot of pavement and gravel, there were times that I just had to carry them in my hands and, just carry them to my side. It's entirely possible that may also have been something that exacerbated the back pain that I struggled with. So that's something I want to think about for future races. Do I even want to fool with poles? Because I didn't need them for this race. Nutrition and hydration, just no. Tailwind is not going to work in the heat either. Tailwind doesn't work, Perpetuum doesn't work, Sword's okay. So I've got some hotter races coming up. I may need to get some Sword, or may need to use Gatorade. I think I got a race coming up that's got Gatorade as the hydration. So I just need to fiddle around and find out, okay, what's something that works really well when it's hot? I do think that I stayed on top of, I didn't have any trouble with cramps at any point, even though I ran low on fluids, because I was taking, in addition to drinking Tailwind early in the race, up until about 10 or 11 when it started to get hot, I was also taking one Endurolite Extreme every hour. And switching up, if I had switched to water, switching to 2 of those an hour, I think would have been sufficient to stave off any potential cramps. So, worth thinking about. Back pain. No idea why I had back pain. I feel like I was pretty well trained, pretty strong coming into this race. So I don't think that it's a lack of time on feet, but it could be. Could have been that I drove too much. I drove an awful lot on Saturday. It was like a 4-hour drive to get to the packet pickup and then an hour back to the hotel, and 30 or 40-minute drive morning of the race to get to the start line. So there was a fair amount of driving involved on Saturday, and maybe that played into it. That's a lot of sitting. Really poor sleep the night before, but that's not unusual for me for a race. And so much so that I really focus on getting a good night's sleep the 2 or 3 nights before the race, because the night before is just frequently doesn't happen. Could have been I did a core workout, a core and upper body workout on Friday, because you think, well, that's not going to hurt anything because legs, I'm not working the legs this week, so it'll be okay to do a core workout. Maybe that was a little too close to race day. I don't think so, because it wasn't that strenuous a workout. But so that's, I want to figure out, that could have been that we just doing that much running on pavement that my back started to hurt too. Pavement and gravel is a little harder surface than a typical trail race. So it may have been that, because at that point I was past a marathon when my back started bothering me. So it may have been that, I just put a little too much time on my feet on a hard surface in. But that's one that I'll probably focus more on, getting more time on feet in training, and focus more on not doing the things that are likely to aggravate a back the day or two leading up to the race. But other than that, I felt like the race went really well. And again, I definitely recommend this race. I think it's a fantastic, fun race to do. I will put a link. Now, the link that I have is probably going to be to this year's race, but I'll put a link to the race in the comments when I post the video. And I would definitely encourage you, if you're interested in the race, to go ahead and sign up for next year's. I don't know what his limits are. I don't know if his race sells out or what, but it's definitely a fun race worth doing.